Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about the impact of changes in the currency markets on global economic stability. We've endured supply chain disruptions as a result of the pandemic over the past 2 years. What I'm about to share could have an even larger impact than anything we've seen in the past 2 years. There's nothing that says the US dollar must have an exchange rate of 75 cents to the euro or 85 cents to the euro, or the Canadian dollar should be 74 cents to the US dollar. If the euro is at parity with the US dollar, that's not a problem in and of itself. The world is used to adapting to whatever becomes the new normal. What the world has a very hard time with are rapid changes, and those rapid changes seem to be everywhere. Today, for the first time in over 20 years, the euro dropped below $1 US. Not only are we experiencing changes in currency values, we're experiencing many of them at the exact same time. The US is perennially in a trade deficit with foreign countries, including China, so the rise in the US dollar could in fact have an inflationary benefit by reducing the cost of imports. That is, of course, unless those import contracts are written in US dollars, and in that case, the benefit of strengthening the US dollar goes to the exporter, not to the American importers. We've seen what the strengthening US dollar has done to numerous economies around the world. I've traveled to Japan so many times. The traditional simple math has been that the US dollar is exchanged for about 100 Japanese yen. In fact, when you travel to Japan, they have the 100 yen store. This is the equivalent of the dollar store that we have in the US. Some things transcend culture, but as of today, the exchange rate to the Japanese yen reached 139 yen to the US dollar. Big changes like this can affect the economics of contracts that span borders. Some of those contracts would have never anticipated a 36% swing in foreign exchange in less than 18 months. Some international trade contracts simply can't be honored at those prices, depending on how they were written. It's not an issue of manufacturing capacity or even supply. It's an issue of profitable global commerce. These changes will create supply chain disruptions, the likes of which we have not even been imagining or predicting. The Argentine peso has fallen 28% against the US dollar in just a short time period. Now, for those Americans looking to vacation in Rome or Paris this summer, the 15% drop in the euro is a welcome benefit, and some of that benefit is clearly offset by much higher airfares. The Turkish lira has fallen by 50% against the US dollar in the past 12 months, 38% alone in the past 6 months. If your global supply chain is interlinked by a complex web of contracts involving foreign exchange and international trade, these type of exchange rate fluctuations over a short time period can break supply chains completely. Previously profitable international trade can become a money-losing proposition. Either these contracts will get renegotiated or the contracts will get ripped up. Either way, you can expect breaks in the supply chain in the meantime. In a report issued 2 weeks ago, the G7 nations have been examining the implications of Russia possibly weaponizing their oil exports. Since oil prices are relatively inelastic with demand in the short term, a reduction of oil output by Russia could have negligible impact on the Russian economy while having a devastating impact globally. The analysis, performed by the team at JP Morgan, suggests that oil prices could reach $190 a barrel if Russia cuts output by 3 million barrels a day, and $380 a barrel if Russia cuts output by 5 million barrels a day. It's not that the world would be unable to adapt to a shift in oil supply, but we would have a very hard time to a sudden shift in oil supply. When you look at the energy produced by natural gas and compare it with oil, the current price of $36 per million BTU for natural gas in Europe is already the equivalent of $200 per barrel of oil. Those two measures would have the same energy output per dollar. When you conduct a historic retrospective and look at social unrest, about violent conflict within a nation, the vast majority of people never saw it coming. And in times of unrest, you see it first in the weakest nations. By now, we've been paying close attention to the protests in Sri Lanka, as people are starving and they've got no fuel. We've seen protests expanding from Peru to Ecuador. The farmers in the Netherlands are protesting their government's recent moves to tax farmers for methane gas emissions from livestock. If the farmers refuse to sign up to new and draconian emission standards, which will effectively put them out of business, the government will seize their farms. Now, if you told me back in 2019 that we would have protesters occupying my home city of Ottawa, Canada for weeks in the depth of winter in the coldest days, I would have said, no, that's unimaginable. How many would have predicted the events of January 6th at the U.S. Capitol? Yet here we are. These are things that would have seemed unthinkable, but are now obvious in hindsight. Energy insecurity is a global issue, and for every unit of economic output, there's an equivalent unit of energy consumed somewhere in the world to produce that economic output. The interest rates being charged in Canada and the US are not exorbitant by historic standards. In fact, they're downright attractive. But those same interest rates have doubled in only a few months. En masse, we don't have the economic adaptability to react to rapid change. If you can adapt to rapid change individually, then you might be ahead of the pack. But more importantly, if you can connect the dots and anticipate the links between all those interconnected economic systems, you might be able to better predict and prepare for what's coming. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.